We're used to seeing world leaders on our screens, making speeches and signing laws. It gives us a sense that someone is in control. But have you ever noticed that no matter who sits in the Oval Office, some things never change? The debt keeps growing, the prices keep rising, and your savings keep losing their value. We're told these are just accidents of the market or the side effects of complex politics. But what if there is a deeper logic at work? To understand why the world feels like it's slipping out of our hands, we have to go back 112 years, beyond the modern corporations and algorithms, to the year when the very foundation of our money was redesigned, 1913. This is not a history lesson. This is a crime story. It involves a secret meeting on a private island, a convenient tragedy in the Atlantic, and a system built to run the world regardless of who we vote for. Today, we go back to the source, the heist of the century that is still happening today. To understand a crime, you must first find the motive. Why did they do it? Go back to 1907, New York City. The stock market crashes. The Knickerbocker Trust fails, and panic spreads like a virus. People line up around the block to withdraw their savings, but the vaults are empty. One man stepped in to save the day, J.P. Morgan. He locked the country's top bankers in his private library and refused to let them out until they pledged $25 million to stop the bleeding. It worked. The panic stopped. J.P. Morgan was hailed as the savior of Wall Street. But here is the part they don't teach you in school. Many historians now believe the panic of 1907 was carefully engineered. Morgan and his allies allegedly fueled the rumors that collapsed his rivals, creating a fire so they could be the ones to put it out. Why? Because the panic gave them the perfect excuse. They realized that $25 million of their own money was a drop in the ocean. They didn't want to be the firemen anymore. They wanted to own the water supply. They needed a lender of last resort, a machine that could print infinite money to cover their bad bets using the public's credit. But they had a problem: the American people. At the time, Americans hated the idea of a central bank. They saw it as an engine of tyranny. So, the bankers needed a plan. They needed to build a fortress for their wealth, but they had to make it look like a gift to the people.
But even with a plan, there were powerful obstacles. Not everyone on Wall Street agreed with J.P. Morgan. There were three titans of industry who stood in his way: John Jacob Astor IV, the richest man in the world at the time; Benjamin Guggenheim, the mining magnate; and Isidor Straus, the owner of Macy's. These weren't just wealthy men, they were the political counterweight to Morgan's faction. Their influence in Washington could have killed any legislation before it even reached the floor. As long as they were alive, the Federal Reserve was just a dream. In April 1912, all three of these men were invited on the maiden voyage of the most luxurious ship ever built, a ship owned by the White Star Line, a company owned by J.P. Morgan himself. Morgan was scheduled to be on that ship. He had his own private suite reserved, but at the very last minute, he canceled. He claimed he was ill, yet he was seen shortly after in France in perfectly good health. Astor, Guggenheim, and Straus boarded the ship. We all know what happened next. On April 15, 1912, the Titanic sank. All three opponents of the Federal Reserve perished in the freezing water. Did J.P. Morgan sink the Titanic to kill his rivals? We will likely never find a signed order, but in the world of high finance, we don't look for smoking guns, we look for the beneficiaries. Is it just a coincidence that the only men powerful enough to stop the Federal Reserve died exactly 20 months before the system was created? With the opposition at the bottom of the ocean, the path was clear, but the plan itself had been written 2 years before the ship even sank. November 1910, Hoboken Station, New Jersey. A private train car with the blinds drawn is attached to a southbound train in the dead of night. On board were 7 men who controlled a quarter of the world's wealth. Their destination? Jekyll Island, an exclusive club off the coast of Georgia, so private that no uninvited foot had ever touched its sand. The secrecy was absolute. They were told to arrive one by one. They were forbidden to dine together in public. They even used code names, addressing each other only by first names, Nelson, Paul, Frank, so that the servants wouldn't realize they were serving the heads of the world's most powerful banking dynasties. If the public had found out that the titans of Wall Street were writing the nation's laws in secret, the project would have been dead on arrival. For 9 days, Paul Warburg, the mastermind representing the European Rothschild interest, laid out the blueprint. He was blunt. We need a central bank, but we cannot call it that. He knew the word bank was toxic to the American people, so they designed a perfect disguise. They called it federal to make it look like the government. They called it a reserve to make it sound safe, and they divided it into 12 regional branches to hide the fact that the strings were all being pulled from a single room in New York. It was a masterclass in deception. The Federal Reserve System was not created on that island to protect your money. It was created to protect the banks from their own failures, using your future as the collateral.
But the bankers had one final problem to solve. If this new private central bank was going to print money and lend it to the U.S. government with interest, where would the government get the money to pay that interest back? The U.S. government didn't have a surplus. It barely had enough revenue to run itself. So, in that same fateful year, 1913, another law was quietly pushed through, the 16th Amendment. This law introduced a permanent income tax on the wages of every working citizen. Think about that. Before 1913, you kept almost everything you earned. There was no federal tax on your labor. To sell this to the public, they lied. They promised the tax would only be 1% and only for the ultra-wealthy. They said it would never touch the average worker, but once the door was open, they never looked back. This was not a coincidence. The tax was not created to build roads or schools. It was created to be the guarantee. It was the collateral the bankers needed to ensure the government could always pay them back. They built the debt machine, the Fed, and the collection agency, the IRS, at the exact same time. One creates the debt, the other extracts the payment from your paycheck. And the cycle never ends. You are literally working to pay the interest on a debt created by a private banking cartel. Your labor is the engine that keeps their system alive. By December 1913, the trap was fully set. The marketing lie was sold. The tax machine was ready. The opposition was at the bottom of the Atlantic. But they still had to pass the law. They knew a full Congress might still vote no, so they used the oldest trick in politics. They waited for the holidays. On December 23rd, while most senators were already on trains heading home to be with their families for Christmas, the Federal Reserve Act was rushed to the floor. The halls were nearly empty. The few who stayed were tired, distracted, and desperate to leave. In this calculated rush, with barely anyone reading the final draft, the keys to the nation's wealth were handed over to a private cartel. President Woodrow Wilson signed it into law hours later. Years later, he would allegedly reflect on this moment with horror, saying, "I have unwittingly ruined my country." But it was too late. While America slept, the heist was complete. So what was the real cost of this heist? Before 1913, a dollar was a gold certificate. It had real value. You could walk into a bank and exchange paper for physical metal. Prices had been stable for over 100 years. But since 1913, the dollar has lost over 97% of its purchasing power. The system created on Jekyll Island did exactly what it was designed to do. It allowed the government to borrow endless money for wars, and it allowed banks to gamble with wealth they didn't have. They traded our gold for their paper, and then, slowly, they made the paper worthless. Every time you see prices rise at the grocery store, you are not seeing an accident of the market. You are seeing the theft of your time happening in real time, exactly as designed.
J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Warburg are long dead, but the machine they built in that dark train car is still running perfectly. It is the engine that powers the modern debt machine. It is the fuel for the military-industrial complex, and it is the invisible hand that moves wealth from your pocket to theirs silently every single day. We are told that we are free because we can vote for our leaders, but the truth is, as long as a private corporation owns the printing press, elections are just a change of scenery. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is the operating system of the modern world. Now that you know how it started, you need to see who is running it today. The heist didn't end in 1913. It just went digital. To understand the AI algorithm that manages this global web of debt right now, click here and watch my breakdown of Aladdin. You need to see the full picture.